This week on Natak Radio, we present a short story by Lois Dykeman Kleihauer, adapted and narrated by Kartic Bhargav.
One of his very first memories was of his father bending down from his great height to sweep him up into the air. And up he went, gasping and laughing with delight. He could look down on his mother's upturned face as she watched, laughing with them, and at the thick shock of his father's black hair and at his white teeth. And then he would come down, shrieking happily. But he was never afraid, not with his father's hands holding him. No one in the world was as strong or as wise as his father. He remembered a time when his father moved the piano across the room for his mother. He watched while she guided it into its new position, and he saw the difference in their hands as they rested, side by side upon the gleaming walnut. His mother's hand was slim and delicate, and his father's large and square and strong. As he grew, he learned to play bear. When it was time for his father to come home at night, he would lurk behind the kitchen door. When he heard the closing of the garage doors, he would hold his breath and squeeze himself into the crack behind the door, and then he would be quiet. It was always the same. His father would open the door and stand there, the backs of his long legs beguilingly close. "Where's the boy?" He would glance at the conspirational smile on his mother's face, and then he would leap and grab his father about the knees, and his father would look down and shout, "Hey, what is this? A bear? No, a young cub." And then no matter how tightly he tried to cling, he was lifted up and perched upon his father's shoulder. And they would march past his mother, and together they would duck their heads beneath the doors. And then he went to school. And on the playground he learned how to wrestle and shout, how to hold back tears, how to get a half Nelson on the boy who tried to take his football away from him. He came home at night and practiced his new wisdom on his father. Straining and puffing, he tried to pull his father off the lounge chair, while his father kept on reading the newspaper, only glancing up now and then to ask in mild wonderment, "What are you trying to do, boy?" He would stand and look at his father. "Come on, Dad." And then he would realize that his father was teasing him. And then he would crawl upon his father's lap and pummel him in affectionate frustration. And still he grew, taller, slimmer, stronger. He was like a young buck with tiny new horns. He wanted to lock them in combat with other young bucks to test them. He measured his biceps with his mother's tape measure. Exultantly, he thrust his arm in front of his father. "Feel that? How's that for muscle?" His father put his great thumb into the flexed muscle and pressed, and the boy pulled back, protesting, laughing. "Ouch, Dad, not so hard." Sometimes they wrestled on the floor together, and his mother moved the chairs back. "Be careful, Vishy, don't hurt him." After a while, his father would push him aside and sit in his chair, his long legs thrust out before him, and the boy would scramble to his feet, half resentful, half mirthful, over the ease with which his father mastered him. "Someday, Dad, someday," he would say. He went out for football and track in high school. He surprised even himself now. There was so much more of him, and he could look down on his mother. "Little one," he called her, or "small fry." Sometimes he took her wrists and backed her into a chair, while he laughed and she scolded, I'll take you across my knee." "Who will?" he demanded. "Well, your father still can," she said. His father? Well, that was different. They still wrestled occasionally, but it distressed his mother. She hovered about them, worrying, unable to comprehend the need for their struggling. And it always ended the same way. The boy on his back, prostrate, and his father grinning down at him. Give, give. And he got up, shaking his head. I wish you wouldn't, his mother would say, fretting. There's no point in it. You'll hurt yourselves. Don't do it anymore. And so, for nearly a year, they had not wrestled. But he thought about it one night at dinner. He looked at his father closely. It was strange, but his father didn't look nearly as tall or as broad-shouldered as he used to. He could even look at his father straight in the eyes now. How much do you weigh, Dad? He asked. His father threw him a mild glance. About the same, about 190. Why? The boy grinned. Just wondering. But after a while, he went over to his father, where he sat reading the newspaper, and took it out of his hands. His father glanced up, his eyes at first questioning, and then narrowing to meet the challenge in his son's. So, he said softly. Come on, Dad. His father took off his coat and began to unbutton his shirt. You asked for it, he said. His mother came in from the kitchen, alarmed. Oh, Vishy, Che, don't. You'll hurt yourselves. But they paid no attention to her. They were standing now with their shirts off. They watched each other, intent and purposeful. The boy's teeth gleamed again. They circled for a moment, and then their hands closed upon each other's arms. They strained against each other, and then the boy went down, taking his father with him. They moved and writhed and turned, in silence seeking an advantage, in silence pressing it to its conclusion. There was the sound of the thumps of their bodies upon the rug, and of the quick, hard intake of breath. The boy showed his teeth occasionally in a grimace of pain. His mother stood at one side, both her hands pressed against her ears. Occasionally her lips moved, but she did not make a sound. After a while, the boy pinned his father on his back. Give, he demanded. His father said, Hell no! And with great effort he pushed the boy off, and the struggle began again. But at the end, his father lay prostrate, and a look of bewilderment came into his eyes. He struggled desperately against his son's merciless, restraining hands. Finally, he lay quiet, only his chest heaving, his breath coming loudly. The boy said, Give. The man frowned, shaking his head. Still the boy knelt on him, pinning him down. Give, he said, and tightened his grip. Give! And all at once his father began to laugh, silently, his shoulders shaking. The boy felt his mother's fingers tugging fiercely at his shoulder. Let him up, she said. Let him up! The boy looked down at his father. Give up? His father stopped laughing, but his eyes were still wet. Okay, he said. I give. The boy stood up and reached a hand to his father to help him up, but his mother's was much before him. Putting an arm about his father's shoulders, she helped him to rise. They stood together and looked at him, his father grinning gamely, his mother with baffled pain in her eyes. The boy started to laugh. I guess Gosh, Dad, I didn't hurt you, did I? Oh, no, I'm all right. Next time? Yeah, maybe next time. And his mother did not contradict what they said, for she knew as well as they that there would never be a next time. For a moment, the three of them stood looking at one another, and then suddenly, blindly, the boy turned. He ran through the door under which he had ducked so many times when he had ridden on his father's shoulders. He went out the kitchen door behind which he had hidden, waiting to leap out and pounce upon his father's legs. It was dark outside. He stood on the steps, feeling the air cool against his sweaty body. He stood with lifted head, looking at the stars. And then he could not see them because of the tears that burned his eyes and ran down his cheeks.